In this video I'm going to go over some key points regarding map design in the upcoming Battlefield title and discuss what I think DICE needs to implement in order to make the maps work properly. I'll take a look at previous Battlefield games such as Battlefield 1, Battlefield 4, Battlefield 3 and Bad Company 2, discussing what made certain maps good on those games and in some cases what made them bad. You have to be careful when looking back at some games as you may view them differently due to the nostalgia, when in fact it may have been the case that the maps in question weren't very good at all. An example of this could be looking back at Battlefield 3, thinking that Damavan Peak was the best map you ever played in your life. You might go back and play it again and think it actually wasn't that good, or you might go back and play it again and think it's actually better than I thought it was. You don't really know until you're actually playing the game again, and that's what I'm trying to say. Now I'm going to split this video up into several different sections, looking at what I think is really important in order to make a successful map. I'm looking for things that can be easily influenced. I'm not saying I'm a map designer, I'm not saying I know exactly what I'm doing, and of course some of these things might be quite insulting to map developers because maybe that's what they're trying to do in game. Maybe they've tried all this stuff and they just can't make it work. I'm not saying that the maps are terrible in Battlefield, I'm just saying if they concentrated on these things in addition to what they're already doing, I'm pretty certain the maps would be far better. Kicking things off, let's take a look at maps for modes. Now this isn't strictly to do with map design per se. One of the most important features in my opinion when designing a map for a Battlefield game is making sure you know what mode is going to be played on it. For this section I'll take a look at two examples, Golmud Railway in Battlefield 4 and Damavan Peak in Battlefield 3. Both of these maps had multiple game modes set on them, and for this I'll focus on just two, Rush and Conquest. Golmud Railway is not a particularly good Conquest map in its current state. The D flag is a bit of a novelty and can clearly give one team an advantage, while cover to counter locks and vehicle balance is completely off. That being said, that isn't really the fault of map design and more the fault of the balance that came afterwards with the vehicles. Overall then, I'd say Golmud is an average Conquest map. When it comes to placing a rush mode on Golmud Railway, it first seemed as if DICE literally plonked MCOMs wherever they fancied on the Conquest map and just went with it. This in my opinion is wrong, and it happened on several maps in Battlefield 4. What they should have done is concentrated on making a new map, possibly in the same setting, in order to make it work. That is why, in my opinion, in Battlefield 4 so many rush maps didn't work properly and had to be reorganised again and again, with placements of MCOMs changing and some hard cover being introduced as the development of the game went on. Now in the case of Damavan Peak, it is clear that the map was specifically designed for rush, and specifically designed for conquest at the same time, as different parts of the map are accessible during different game modes. This made for a fantastic rush map that even today is still being played a lot, and a conquest map that although not the best, did a decent job and was a lot of fun to play. What I'm trying to say here is that when designing a map for the new Battlefield game, DICE really should consider making maps that fit the game mode specifically. And from a positive side, I have seen this more and more in Battlefield 1. You can see it with operations and frontlines. They've definitely thought about extending the map so there's more room for these extra game modes. Create 5 maps that are amazing conquest maps. Create 5 maps that are amazing rush maps. And create 5 maps that have amazing operation campaigns. The actual setting for all the maps can be the same, but each should have its own specific area, and to be fair, as I just mentioned, we have seen it more in Battlefield 1. It is clear with maps such as Ballroom Blitz that DICE created part of the map that would be used for operations and not for conquest, something that we haven't seen for a long time. Take a look at Bad Company 2. This game focused on rush, and for me it nailed the experience. I think I do underestimate how hard it must be to try and fit 4 to 5 game modes on one single map, but if DICE were to just focus on fitting one game mode on a map and then expanding the map for other modes, as they've done with Battlefield 1, we could have a far better experience overall. Next up, let's take a look at hard cover. One of my major gripes with Battlefield 1 is the lack of cover to avoid getting taken out by grenades, planes and airships. The major cover that you do find on the game tends to be in places with bottlenecks such as the bunkers on Monte Grappa. All maps have natural cover in some way, shape or form, so in gunfights you can retreat and find a spot to hide in, but actual cover to get away from vehicles and be safe to engage in purely infantry combat is quite hard to find. In Battlefield 4 you had maps such as Zavod and Dawnbreaker. These maps had flags with pure, indestructible hard cover, and as an infantry player you could hide from vehicles and do a job. In Battlefield 1, I feel as if this is lacking, and as I mentioned before, the large areas of hard cover that can sometimes be found often create large bottlenecks and massive opportunities for a war of attrition using grenades. This is most notable on Monte Grappa, on the flag with the turret during a game of Frontlines. In the next Battlefield title, I want to see maps taking into account hardcover in a similar way to maps such as Amiens and St. Quentin's Scar. In my opinion, these two maps have good all-round cover and access for infantry to bypass vehicles and take cover in buildings. This is a weird problem to try and describe, but I'm sure you've all felt that some maps on Battlefield leave you quite exposed as an infantry player, especially when the behemoth comes along. With Battlefield 1, this also points towards the reason why there are so many snipers on certain maps. It's purely down to the fact that they can snipe from one flag to another and be quite successful when killing enemies. The reason they shouldn't be able to do that is because you're trying to have a fight with somebody on one flag and someone's sniping you from maybe 500-600 meters away. That is fine in certain situations, but for me, it's far too random on certain maps in Battlefield 1. I was playing on Albion and some other In the Name of the Tsar maps a few days ago, and I really felt as if I was quite exposed. For some part of the game I was having a great time, some of the flag to flag engagements absolutely perfect, and then other times I was getting sniped from 6 different directions and I had no cover. I couldn't go prone, there was nothing I could do. Added with the suppression, so you can't really shoot back because you're going to end up missing your shots if you're being sniped by loads of people, it's not a fun experience. When you're playing on Amiens, I think the infantry gameplay there is fantastic. The amount of flanking routes you have, the amount of hard cover to hide from tanks and explosives is pretty much perfect, and for me that nails the Battlefield 1 experience. As I mentioned, other maps which are fairly open, like St. Quentin's Scar, do get the cover quite right, and I feel as if the placement of walls, the placement of buildings, and some of the undulating landscape really helps. Next up, let's take a look at map size. Map size in Battlefield is a major talking point. In my opinion, Conquest maps should range from being small to absolutely huge, in a similar way to how they did in Battlefield 4. Maps such as Flood Zone are fairly small, whilst maps such as Golmud or Silk Road are massive. This provides players with different options for different experiences, and is what DICE should be aiming to do. They did a good job with the variety on Battlefield 1 with loads of different types of maps, and that should really continue into the future. If there's one thing that I know DICE will get right, then that is the sheer beauty of a huge Battlefield map. Another problem that I see with bigger maps though in Battlefield is the way you get around them as an infantry player. You don't always want to be relying on vehicles in order to get from A to B, or A to E, or A to F, as some maps have many flags these days. What I'd like to be able to see is a map that flows well. Getting from flag to flag shouldn't be difficult. We've seen it on maps such as Sinai Desert when you place a flag far out of the way. Although it might be intended to be capped by a plane or by a vehicle, it doesn't always end up that way, and quite often it's left alone for the entire match. Setting. Now this is important. The type of maps we get and the way they play will be quite dependent on the type of setting we receive. Imagine playing Battlefield 4 but with Battlefield 1 weapons and vehicles. It would be a completely different experience, with some maps not working at all and some working very well indeed. I think maps such as Silk Road would be 100 times better with Battlefield 1 vehicles, as you wouldn't get lock-ons and you would have some incredible tank battles. Maps such as Locker might even be worse with Battlefield 1 weapons because of the increased grenade spam, although it is fairly bad on Locker already. You can see what I'm talking about. The setting or genre of a game will have a massive impact on whether the map succeeds. If we do go back to a modern military day shooter, which is my bet, I think it could be as old as a Vietnam setting, but my guess is it's going to be something fairly modern. We're going to be seeing vehicles that get around the map a lot faster. We're going to be seeing helicopters, we're going to be seeing jets, we're going to be seeing jet skis and buggies and all sorts of fun stuff that we saw in Battlefield 4. While you think of Battlefield 1, the fastest vehicle, apart from the fighters and stuff, which you're not really supposed to use for transport, you're going to be looking at maybe the armoured car or the horse, and they're really not that fast. That means you're going to be on foot a lot of the time, and navigating a map can be quite difficult. As I said, the setting has a big bearing on how the game will play. So until we really know that, which we're not going to know for at least a couple more months, it might be difficult to say what sort of maps we want to receive. That being said, I think it will be modern, so I think they should focus on taking the best maps from previous Battlefield games that were modern, and then looking at recreating them almost. I wouldn't be too opposed to DICE taking some of the favourite maps from previous Battlefield games and making those the vanilla maps for the new game. I know people want to see new content, but if they made it sort of a homage to the favourite maps and kept the flag placement and the cover, maybe you could have a Seine Crossing and a Grand Bazaar map sort of thing. I suppose Amiens is quite similar to Seine Crossing in that respect. You could maybe have a Dawnbreaker, you could have an Operation Locker with maybe a little bit of development in terms of the lanes so there wasn't so many bottlenecks, and then you could pick maybe a map like St. Quentin's Scar and build on that. I'm just saying what they should do is take all of the good things from previous Battlefield games and put them into map design in the next one, instead of starting from scratch and giving themselves far more problems than they really need to have. Let me know in the comments what you think of map design in Battlefield. I really want to know what your favourite maps are. It's always nice to know what the rest of the community think, because of course this is just my opinion and I could be wrong. Thanks for watching guys, and I'll catch you in the next video.